Today we're talking with Joan Avant of Red Mask Records.
Hello.
Joan, introduce yourself.
Well, my name's Joan. Well, so some people ask, is that really your name? And yes, it really is my name. My name is Joan Avant. I'm a Dallas-based musician, multi-instrumentalist, and songwriter in a style of gothic symphonic rock. And yeah, that's a start, right?
That's a great start.
Okay.
Where are you from?
I'm a lifelong Texan, so I was born in East Texas, so I grew up in some of the small towns there, so notably Kilgore and Longview. So I grew up around a lot of pine trees. Big pine trees.
How would you describe your music?
I had a friend who actually helped me kind of figure out what the style was I was doing, and she said, "Spooky beautiful." So I'm like, that. Yeah, I can. And it's not like, oh, I think my music is just so beautiful. It's just that I do try to make it melodic. I do try to make it with lots of melodies and harmonies and things that would be considered beautiful, but the themes are kind of strange, and I use a lot of minor tonality, so that can always certainly sound spooky. So for sure, that's probably in a nutshell.
And if you had to put it in a genre, what would you say?
For the most basic, gothic rock is probably the easiest way to do it. I do say that it's Victorian gothic because the Victorian has more to do with the types of themes. I do choose a lot of historical themes to write about, or even fantasy themes, for instance, like Sirens, but the Victorians would use a lot of mythology and a lot of almost King Arthur legends, you know what I'm trying to say, and a lot of classic literature or mythology, and so I certainly like to put that fantasy element in the music. So
yeah, I think that shows. Your first album is Drownophilia. How did that come about?
Well, kind of song by song. I didn't, when I went into it, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to call this album Drownophilia and it's going to be like this or that. I would say it first started, I wanted to experiment and see if I could write a pop rock song, basically. Can I write just a 3.5 minute song that has hooks, has is pop or rock sensible, and just see if I could do it, because I have the classical background, and but I tended to listen to more rock, metal, pop, dance music, all kinds of other things besides classical music. So I'm like, why do they have it so easy? Why can they just write these great songs and I'm just over here struggling to make anything sound good? So first, the first one that came along was The Factory, and so that kind of got the ball rolling with, okay, you wrote a song, and then it turned into many other songs, and then it kind of, I think the style kind of formed itself in a sense. I didn't go out just saying, oh, I'm going to write this. It is what came out in a sense. So.
I think that's interesting because The Factory, I think, is different from the other songs on the album.
Sure.
It's kind of more contemporary subject.
Right. It's about, and for those of you who don't know, The Factory is based off of Andy Warhol's his place called the Factory, and so it's a very it's a very 1960s New York chic kind of song, and so yeah, that kind of got the ball rolling, but to kind of tie in, how do you tie in Andy Warhol with Victorian? Well, I would say that the popular themes, because Andy Warhol would paint the popular, even mundane things, and so in the Victorian period is actually where you start getting all of the commercial posters, and you start getting all of the Art Nouveau style advertisements for cigarettes and magazines and booze and things like that. So there's my tie-in.
Interesting. How did Drownophilia end up being the title track for that album?
That when that song came across, as I recall, it was maybe the fourth or fifth song down the pipe,
Rabbit hole.
down the rabbit hole, and it was the first song I had used violin on, like real violin on. And then I was like, it just really, something about that song just really changed the vibe of the album, I think. And so it just ended up being, I think, kind of the cornerstone of the album, in a sense. It's also, too, the theme is incredibly Victorian. The Drownophilia is based off of the Lizzie Siddal stories. Lizzie was the pre-Raphaelite muse, so painted by basically all of the Brotherhood, as they called themselves, the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. And so the famous painting by John Millay was, where she's in the water, and it's a very macabre kind of picture. And so she was Ophelia. So I'm tying in her true life story with that painting, how she really was sort of a tragic muse. She really was an Ophelia. So anyway, it certainly tied in with the Victorian themes, and it was just one of those real life stories you read and it just really hits you hard. And I wanted to talk about it and kind of explore what that might have been about.
Which song on that album was the most fun to create or to record?
Sirens. And that's basically because
all the creepy vocals.
That's always fun when you can go back and put subliminal messages in there just to freak people out a little bit. That one was fun. Some songs come to you in on a tugboat, so it's like real slow, real, you're just trudging through. And other songs are like an express train. That song was like an express train. It just kind of came hard and fast in a sense. So that's kind of fun when that happens, because it doesn't seem like as much work. And then it's a fun rock and roll call and response kind of song. And so I had fun doing it, so I hope it sounds fun to people listening to it, of course. But yeah.
Well, you mentioned subliminal messaging. Is there a hidden message or a hidden theme in any of your songs? I don't mean subliminal, but...
Well, yeah. If you play it backwards, it says worship Satan.
Perfect.
Right. Messages. I think every...
Or hidden meanings.
I would say that all of my songs are each individual song is a story. I'm almost more of a storyteller than here's some cool lyrics. The songs tend to be very like you're reading a novel or a fairy tale or something, and it's I do like to, sometimes I will write about something because I don't understand it, so maybe it's kind of trying to figure something out. Like, in more simpler terms, my music is about struggle, and I think you can certainly hear that in the music. I'm kind of an intense person, and so I think you're certainly going to hear that in the music, and I think you're going to hear the struggle and the so I think you're certainly going to hear that musically, if maybe not thematically, so with lyrics, etc.
Can you tell me about your writing process?
Why, yes, I can.
No.
No, it's a secret. Yes, so I always start with the piano. So I go to the keyboard first, and I fully map out melodies and chord progressions and things like that first. So that's kind of my foundation. And then from there, and by the way, I do this along with a drum loop. So if you're wondering, like, well, how does she even keep time? Well, I usually decide on what kind of tempo I want, and then I play along with this kind of drum loop, which gets subtracted by the end of the process. But so I have this kind of machine going on that I put everything in time to. I don't want to just play to a metronome. So at least there's something a little more musical about a drum loop than a metronome. And then after I call it the cantus firmus. Sorry, I'm a music school nerd, so that's kind of my cantus firmus. It's what I start with and build everything else around. And so then I go to bass. It's always easier to write bass up, I think. So once I have the idea of chord progressions, I like to lay the foundation of bass. And then I go to drums. It's a kind of rhythm section first. And then I go to guitar. And then I go to any other synthesizers, orchestration, strings, violin, anything else that might get added in there. And then finally I do vocals. Some people tell me that's all backwards, but that's okay, because that's how I roll. But yeah.
So you've never started with lyrics first? Almost always vocals at the end?
Yeah, I mean, occasionally you get these like, moments, like where you maybe hear a lyric in your head and you have not written down, you have no foundation, you have no piano, you can have these little sayings or something that just pop into your head. So sometimes those really do get put in there. They really do end up.
But more like a clip of the lyric.
It would be a clip of it, yeah. Like you're like, oh, that's a cool thought, or that's it seems like that rhymes, or something. Something strikes you. That can happen, and I do usually try to put it in there, but it has to be very fleshed out and all.
Yeah.
That. But yeah.
Interesting. What kind of books do you read?
Oh dear. You know. I read a lot of, don't judge me, I read a lot of YA fiction. You can probably tell. That's why I'm practically illiterate. No, but I do read a lot of kind of fantasy, but it has to be, that I have some criteria though. It has to be turn of the century. It has to be, 1800s going into 1900s. It has to have fabulous costumes. It has to,
in your head.
In my head, yeah, because it's a book, because who knows. I also really do like to read history, so I'm currently reading a book called The Victorians. It's kind of bumming me out, though, because it's kind of like, people who drop names, It seems like that's all the book is. It's like, this guy's just drop names. And I'm like, I wish I knew who these people were, But anyway, the gist of it's good, though. But I read history. I'm currently reading a bit of philosophy right now, reading a book by R.C. Sproul, The Consequence of Ideas. So I've been reading 1984. I know I'm a Johnny-come-lately on that, but I have been reading that, and wow. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit all over the place, but a big YA nerd. So,
do you think that influences your music?
I certainly have to have. I have to have input to have output, I would say. So it certainly can, and I do like the idea of having kind of fantasy stories, like Masquerade, for instance, is very much a twist on Poe's, Mask of the Red Death. And I had just read actually one of like a kind of a YA novel about these people living in that world of like, and this is pre-plague, by the way, so I had read this book before, COVID and all of that, and so I'm like, oh, that's so dark and everything, and then you're kind of like, oh, oh look, we get to experience
Now
this
I'm
for
doing
real.
it.
Right. You know, and like in the story, like everyone had these special masks that protected them, you know, and all of this stuff. And I'm like, oh, it's just kind of creepy now. So anyway, but yes, it certainly can. So.
Have you tried your hand at writing? Beyond music.
Beyond music. Yes. When my kids were little, I've always just needed some kind of creative output. So I did actually just write a novel. No one's seen it. No one's, ever read it. It's probably in horrible condition. I can only imagine if I went back to go read it. But maybe it's something I'll dredge up one of these days. But the title of it was Dreams of Momart, so you might have
sounds familiar.
Might sound familiar to you if you know me at all. So.